Hello everybody and welcome to today's 10-minute briefing around the Worker Protection Act for staff working within the performing arts or creative sector. My name is Carly and I'm the consultant who's going to be working through this briefing with you today. So let's first start with thinking about the legal landscape and what the key and outcome of the Worker Protection Act is. Now, when we think about this legislation, what it ultimately aligns to is creating safe working environments for everybody, whether they're freelancers, full-time staff, contractors, that actually our workspaces are safe and free from sexual harassment and misconduct. And when we think about the legal landscape of sexual harassment, particularly in the workplace, this isn't new. Section 26 of the Equalities Act of 2010, as part of the wider aspects of discriminatory practice, very much talked about sexual harassment, and it shouldn't be something that occurs through the course of somebody's employment, particularly within their spaces of work. But where this is different from the Equalities Act is from the Worker Protection Act new legal duty, which came into force on the 26th of October 2023, it now outlines in law that the employer has a proactive role to play to take what it calls reasonable steps in the prevention of sexual harassment or sexual misconduct taking place in the workplace. So, a more active role outlined in this legislation, employers now need to take actions and steps to prevent employees from experiencing this form of harm. And because ultimately we want our workplaces to be safe, but also if it reaches employment tribunal, and the tribunal feels the employer has breached its reasonable preventative steps as part of this legal duty, it could be instructed to have to pay up to 25% uplift compensatory award to the employee itself. So huge financial implications to all employers should they not administer these new, very clear legal duties. So when we consider starting off around what is sexual misconduct or sexual harassment, what are the types of behaviours which could constitute as those forms of harm in this space? Now, the Equalities and Human Rights Commission has helped produce for employers a guidance document giving very clear and tangible examples of such behaviours. Behaviours as outlined here on our current screen for you. It's thinking not only about their physical conduct, but also maybe discussions, phrases, jokes, derogatory language that's used, or the sharing of intimate content that causes a level of distress or discomfort within others. It's these types of behaviours that we're trying to outlaw from taking place in somebody's place of work. Because where you work should feel safe, it should feel comfortable. It shouldn't be a space where we fear being involved with these types of behaviours or maybe just witnessing them and being adversely impacted as a result. So the starting point for many employers in thinking about what are those reasonable steps, how do I administer my preventative duty on the back of this law, where that often starts is with a needs analysis, what we often think of in terms of an organisational audit, checking things such as policy and procedures to really work out what is our starting point of how we ensure we align and adhere to these new legal requirements. And of course, that starts with being specific to the workforce and the sector itself, knowing your employee demographic. Naturally, in creative arts, we may also have freelancers, contractors, things around such as dance coaches, vocal coaches, instructors. Our duty equally applies to them if they're contracted as part of the work and engagement with our service users, our patrons, our participants. So it's knowing your demographic and recognising actually may there be some members of staff where allegations of this nature may naturally be heightened, particularly in roles that might require for the course of the conduct things like physical contact. being a ballet instructor, you're probably going to have to help maneuver people physically. Could that lead to risk, to allegations? Certainly, we need to make more specific there by knowing our staff, their needs, and the duties they naturally perform. How do we create that safe space for everybody as for part of them conducting their day-to-day practice? Also, environmental considerations. Thinking about the spaces employees they work within. If you're conducting workshops, perhaps in youth organisation settings, maybe school environments, what could be the risk of those types of harms happening possibly in other organisations? Things around the buildings, the venue, whether you are perhaps something like a theatre, your backstage areas, the risk assessments we might need to conduct there, things around changing facilities for performances. It really does get to starting with knowing your organisation and really doing that audit around areas to consider and possible areas of weakness that we might need to strengthen and evolve. How are we outlining that within our policies, our procedures, providing clarity for everybody, particularly around what we expect in terms of their behaviour? Unsafe cultures can be created if we are permissible or excusing of people, particularly if their behaviour may be aligned to some of those previous actions. And ultimately, how are we raising awareness for all of what the steps are, how it's reported, who it's reported to, what are the actions and timescales, and possibly even actions around investigations should it progress in that manner. And it's all of that stuff which then helps to define for us through that audit what reasonable steps our organisation is able to make in response to this. Because of course, what will be reasonable will naturally vary according to the organisation itself. The size, the sector, the working spaces, and of course the resources and capacity you have to implement those steps and actions too. But regardless of size or sector, every employer has to comply. We all need to be taking more of a preventative role and action to make sure all workspaces are safe for everybody. So those reasonable steps are not merely tick box activities. We need to consider all of our reflections here on the screen, particularly if you are listening today as a senior manager, a chief exec, a director, to ensure that we are compliant and even more importantly, that we make sure our workplaces and spaces feel safe for everyone. How that links to then a positive and effective culture we have in our organisation. How we're proactive in terms of reviewing, responding to needs outlined in our policies and procedures. That we raise awareness, we provide support, development to those, so it's clearly understood. And of course, risk assessments, highlighting areas of weakness, being preventative and proactive to mitigate any concerns. And who and how should staff report? Making sure we're very clear around providing ample opportunity for them to share concerns and be involved in those next steps and processes to help ensure that we support them in a holistic way too. So if you are here today for the first time engaging with this legislation, particularly if you have those duties to administer them through the course of your organisation itself, we are very much here to support you and your wider staffing teams, whether that is by developing with you bespoke training to your sector, to your organisation for staff, raising awareness, or for those that will have that responding to duty. Perhaps you'd like us to become involved to support you around things like auditing, consultancy. We also have lots of wider great free resources for you to tap in to further your knowledge and skills also. We're all over social media. Please do engage with us. Thank you so much for stopping by today, and we hope we engage you again in the future. Take care, everyone.